Yeah, so I spent a lot of time building requirements, and oftentimes that requirement just kind of flows into the user interface. So, and I'm really kind of more interested on the user interface side of development, although all my back-end developers always give me a hard time about that. Anyway, websites are getting really complicated, complex, and you got all these new rich internet apps. Single-page apps using some of the cool JavaScript frameworks, etc. With that, you've got to be careful on just jumping in and coding. It really helps to kind of spec things out a little bit first. And sometimes one of the best ways to spec things out is the user interface part. We're going to talk a little bit about doing that. I don't know if anyone's ever asked you the question, have you done any wireframes? Okay, we're not going to talk about the cool, card-type wireframes. Those are definitely important in a different industry, but that's not what we're going to talk about. What we're going to talk about is wireframes for websites and these web applications. Okay, so what are these? There's actually a broad spectrum, and we're going to talk about a fair amount of this spectrum. You don't have to be an artist to do wireframes. You don't have to be a graphic designer to do wireframes. And the more you do them, the easier it gets, just like a lot of things. So with wireframes, what we really have is basically a visual representation of how you want your website to work, how it will lay out on the page, the flow of the site or the application, etc. So it's basically a visual blueprint. Okay. Now, why do wireframes? Well, first of all, they're pretty cheap to build. Doesn't take a lot of effort, and they're very easy to change. So once you've started creating them, it's funny, once you put something on paper, and this is true too of requirement docs, once you put something on paper, people start going, well, wait a minute, that's not what I had in mind. They may describe a requirement, but then as soon as they see it visually, they'll kind of go, well, that's not it. Or, hey, now that's right on. Can you just change this one element? So they're very inexpensive to build. It's a great thing to do before you start coding. And if, hey, sometimes you just have to throw them away. They're not, they may be an idea, and you're throwing out an idea, and nobody buys off on it, but, you haven't wasted a whole lot of effort. So I like them because it's a great way to show the functionality. I'm going to give you a use case that we're actually right smack in the middle in, and it's helped out a lot building this particular application. Okay, so what do these things allow you to do? Well, you can experiment with the UI design. You can experiment with not only the layout, where the content goes, where images, videos, etc. may go, with navigation, all that kind of stuff. It does give you a chance to kind of test out, how's this thing going to work? Is it going to be intuitive to my target users? It's also a great way to gain consensus, building, in essence, requirements through a visual interface. And it's also a great way to tell a story. One time when I was out presenting ideas to potential investors for a startup I was trying to do, one of the things that I got constantly feedback is on, well, you got to show us what this thing's going to do. So I started building wireframes, and it was like, aha, I get it. So it was much easier to tell a story through visual images than it was through, just a business plan, if you will. Okay, I'm not going to go into all this stuff, but what I wanted to show you here is that when you look at, the whole UX phenomenon, user experience design, wireframes are just one of the key components. They're not the only thing. It does help to do some upfront identification of your target users, what are their use cases, what's a potential flow to actually accomplish something. We'll talk a little bit more about those aspects. And then you start looking at doing designs and prototyping and all that kind of fun stuff. I was looking for something on the web to try to identify how much you could potentially save by doing wireframing early in the process. And This particular individual had done a fair amount of research, looked at traditional waterfall methods, and then looked at Agile. Of course, this is the best case Agile. But what they found was, if you're doing changes down here, it's a lot cheaper than when it starts, going out. And most of us are probably somewhere here in the middle. It's hard to be perfect at Agile, but still, we can save a lot of money by doing this up front. Okay, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, what's the flow of actually doing wireframes? How do you go about doing them? We're going to get into some of the things I've used that have helped me a lot, especially to save time and when I'm doing more and more of these. What I'd like to talk about really is this part down here. So the process flow and then doing the wireframes. So it's all the conceptual part. The traditional model has been something like this. You come up with a concept, and you can even kind of create some wireframes in that concept stage. In fact, a lot of people use paper or whiteboards or anything like that. You just throw down ideas. Then you start working on a low fidelity wireframe, and I'll talk about the difference between low fidelity and high fidelity in a minute. And then you'd send it to the designer, and maybe if you're running dev, you start building out some prototypes. And some of the time that goes on at the same time. And so, the concept stage allows you to start capturing ideas and what the basic interface might look like. And then you can look at the layout, show interaction, and also then start having your designers create the design elements, even the elements that you would capture and use on your website. The other thing too is typically it does help, and this will vary, but it does help to get feedback from the developers, if you're not one, on, does this really make sense? Can we actually do this kind of stuff? And it's also a great place to get feedback. And that feedback can vary quite a bit at each stage. And in some cases, you're targeting different people, different stakeholders, different target users, different individuals for getting feedback at different points. But I think there's actually a more accelerated model today, and that is creating what I call the interactive wireframe. You can actually get out of having to do a whole lot of prototyping by using some of the better interactive wireframing tools that are out on the market today. Before we jump into some of the options, I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of low fidelity and high fidelity. And both of them are fine. You don't feel like you have to do one versus the other. Some people just naturally gravitate to one or the other. But both of them have their place, and both of them have strengths. I think if you just recognize some of the weaknesses of the other model, it'll be just fine. With low fidelity, these tend to be, there's actually literally dozens and dozens of online tools today that you can use for wireframing. And many of them are built specifically for wireframing. That's all they do. So they've gotten really quite good. They allow you to build stuff very quickly. They're very easy to put together. You can change them quickly. The best part is that they're online for the most part, and because of that, they allow you to create the interaction from page to page, or even if it's a single page app, just to show what's going to change every time you invoke some action. And because they're online, almost all of them have some form of collaboration, so it's very easy to share between others that you want to get feedback on or from. Now, high fidelity, the designers tend to use these tools because they're familiar with them. These are the illustrators and Photoshops and other types of similar tools that allow you to create some really nice looking. And so for the evaluator, they really like it because it makes it's even easier to figure out what's going on. These tend to be mostly the desktop type tools. But these tools in the past have lacked a couple of things. One is they're not that good at creating the interaction between pages, and they're also not that great at helping you to collaborate. You have to go back to the old school model of emailing stuff and hoping people will comment on it. Okay, so it kind of helps us. Maybe it's hard to see, but it's basically simple axis here. You've got the people who are creating the wireframes, which could be you, and your target evaluators who are going to look at these things and figure out, yeah, this is a pretty cool design. Works well, or it doesn't work. The low fidelity wireframes are really easy to create, so they're great for creators, but they're a little more difficult for the evaluators. On the other hand, the high fidelity ones are even closer to the actual design, so they're much harder to create, but they're really nice for the evaluators. So you have to kind of weigh between the two, just know the differences. You don't have to become a graphic designer to do wireframes. I think you can do them no matter who you are. Now, it's still not easy to create good design or good layout, but I think the tools are available today. I used a tool called Mockingbird to create this particular wireframe. This is what I would call a little bit more on the lower end of the fidelity, but it's very easy to create. I created this thing pretty quickly. I actually based this on something I got online. This was created in Keynote, which is the Mac presentation app. The guy who actually created it is a big proponent of using Keynote for creating wireframes. The challenge, of course, with Keynote and also PowerPoint, which is what I like to use, is that they're not very good at collaboration or showing interaction. You can play some games to show interaction, but it's not very good. Especially when you have apps with conditional logic where you potentially jump to different areas based on input from the user. And that's always impossible to show in PowerPoint or Keynote. Or Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever. So these aren't a big difference between the two, but you can see one was pretty quick to build, the other looks a lot better, but it does take a lot longer. Now, of course, once you get familiar with these tools, you can create them pretty quickly. In fact, there's a lot of shortcuts I'm going to show you, no matter what tool you pick, that can help you create stuff very quickly. At least, learn to create stuff very quickly. Okay, there's literally, like I said, dozens and dozens of tools you can potentially use. I'm not going to promote one over the other. I'll let you choose. A lot of that will depend on just your style, your flair for design or artistic or whatever. Now, like we talked about, in that conceptual phase, using pen and paper is actually not bad. It's a great way to get a quick concept together, or using a whiteboard to show somebody, hey, here's a pretty cool idea of what we could do. So it kind of fits right into that conceptual. So you don't have to go be some guru on some cool online tool. You can just do them on your, wherever. Now, in terms of online tools, I mean, literally there are dozens and dozens of these. I just picked a few. I played around with some of these. Some of these I've actually used Mockingbird quite a bit. It's not a bad tool. There's actually a free version of some of these, the ones that are asterisks. They all have a free version. Glyphy positions itself as a Visio replacement. Online Visio replacement. It actually does a pretty decent job of it, so you can use it for other things such as creating flows, org charts, all kinds of good stuff, network maps, etc. So it's not the best for wireframing per se, but you can do them. And if you're familiar with the tool and use it for other things, it's a great one to use. Balsamic gets a lot of traction. I mean, every time I talk to a lot of folks, I mean, they always bring up balsamic this, balsamic that. Personally, I don't like it that well, but I did mention it just because it's well known. This by far is my favorite online tool, UXPin. It's not a free one, but it is really, really good. Not free, so it does have a monthly subscription fee, but it's got all kinds of cool tools, and I'll come back to it in a little bit. Talk about it as an example of one that includes all kinds of really neat tools for creating websites and web apps. You just have to drag these elements in, so they're really neat. On the desktop side, there's a couple of pretty neat products out there besides the Adobe family, and I have nothing wrong with CS. I love Photoshop. I use it all the time. I use PowerPoint a lot, and I like to use PowerPoint just because I know the tool so well. I can do stuff pretty quickly. Pencil Project's actually not a bad tool, and it's free, so you can use it to your heart's content. Justin, mine has a free version you can play with, and it's actually quite a good product, especially if you're in a bigger company. It's got some, even though it is a desktop tool, it does have some collaboration capabilities built in, and it's really well suited for running something by a large group of people. Okay, so how do you pick? So you got to kind of decide what level of fidelity you're comfortable with. And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. You can pick whatever you like. Interaction is really important to create. I think you can take a step out and not have to do some of this early prototyping, because a lot of the online tools especially have, and I'm going to talk about a tool you can use with desktop products, to give you that ability to show interaction and collaboration support. I mean, it's so much easier than playing an email game to, just say, hey, go hit this URL and you can add your comments right on each screen. They can see the interaction, they can give you immediate feedback, it's very cool. Device support. One of the things I was really impressed with is some of the products out there actually allow you to design responsive websites and apps. That's pretty cool. UXPN is one of them. It's one of the reasons I really like it, is because it's got built-in mobile as well as different size screens, and it'll help actually show what your design looks like in different screen layouts and device sizes. Another, of course, is how familiar are you with the tool? A lot of designers who do wireframing love Illustrator or Photoshop. Our group in-house tends to use Illustrator a lot, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually a great tool. The question, of course, one of the questions is how quickly can you create wireframes? Low fidelity, can you do much faster? The higher fidelity, sometimes take longer. And same thing with change. They can be changed quite a bit quicker using some of the lower fidelity tools. Personally, I would, unless you're super familiar with some of the high fidelity tools, I'd probably, if you ask me, I'd recommend one of the, and you've got a budget to spend a little bit of money, I'd recommend one of the online tools that does support a lot of built-in wireframing tools, something like UXPN or a similar type product. Now, a couple guys in our company introduced me to this tool. I had no idea it existed. I would have liked to have known a lot sooner. It's a great product, especially if you're one of the ones that leans more towards some of the desktop, high fidelity type tools. What it does is it gives you the ability to actually add that interaction. And all you have to do is upload screenshots, JPEGs, PNGs, whatever, and then you can actually put simply select areas, hotspots, whether they're a button or a link or whatever, to jump to another page. So you can show all that interaction, and it's got built-in collaboration, so it's very cool. I'd like to know about this actually much sooner. I, last summer, basically created some wireframes around a getting started guide. As you know, Bluehost is a hosting company, and for you guys, it's pretty easy to set up your hosting, but we have a lot of novice users. And in fact, one of our feedback that we get from people who leave quickly is that it was too hard. So we're trying more and more to make it easier. So I came up with this wizard, a getting started guide to make it really easy to set up at least their first email, get their web app installed for building their website, like WordPress or whatever, and also add additional domains, which that's a real tough one for a lot of people. The challenge was it had a lot of complex logic. So you could select something and it would go over here or over there, and it was very difficult to show people just in a PowerPoint. So I actually, let me jump out of here. If I can find right there. Just jump over here. Okay, So this is, I actually created some simple prototypes, just HTML, CSS, and just a little bit of jQuery. So pretty simple. And, it helped people to kind of see the interaction. Okay, I want to get started. Okay, great. Yeah, I do need, no, I don't need any help getting started. I can do it myself. There's a quick start if you want help. And then here's kind of a flow of walking through and doing email and setting that whole up. I won't do that right now. But just to show the logic, it jumps straight to the next section, which is setting up your website. That was fun to do, but I could have saved a whole lot of time if I'd have known this other tool. So here's basically the same thing. And all I had to do is upload, just screenshot these things, and then upload the image, and build out little fun little links between them, so somebody can actually see how this thing works, and you can do it really fast. So let's jump back into this. So all I had to do is upload all these images, like that. I don't even part of them. And for the purpose of this demo, and then you go into each one of these green areas that are actually part of a template so that you can reuse them, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about, is actually using stuff that you can reuse, just like coding. Top part 2, you can see it says 2 templates applied. The top part's 1 template, and kind of the breadcrumbs, and the bottom tab is another template. And then the blue boxes are ones that I created specifically for each page. And this could even still be a single page app. I'll show this, just to give people a feel for how the app's going to flow. So anyway, the cool thing is that a lot of the online tools have this built in. A good example, Mockingbird, it's got a great way to show every one of the buttons and images and whatnot, or whatever, can be linked to another page. So it's got built-in interaction. This tool is only useful if you're using products like Photoshop, Illustrator, PowerPoint, Keynote, to help add that extra piece that's not available. I thought I would take a time while I was preparing this presentation to try some of the different tools and see how easy it would be to build out, how close it would be to kind of showing off what the layout of this was. Just a web page, and I actually, I just took our new website, took one page. So this is just a screenshot. This is not using any tools, just so you can see what it looks like. This is one of the hero images. There's a number of them. So I started with Mockingbird because I know the product a little bit. It's more lower fidelity. It doesn't allow you to upload any images, but you simply can drop in where the images would go. It does allow you to add all the text. Every one of these buttons can be a link to another page. Links up at the top, which is the menu, etc. And the images themselves can be links as well. So it's pretty cool, and it's you can build stuff pretty quickly once you get familiar with the tool. It's not that hard to use. Next I tried Gliffy. Gliffy is that one that I mentioned is kind of a Visio, online Visio replacement product. And it does give you the ability to upload images. So, it does start to kind of give you that feel for what it's like. The font support in Mockingbird is pretty weak. You use anything but Arial or Helvetica on your website, you're not going to get that cool font look with a product like Mockingbird. You've got a few more fonts here, but not a lot. But it does give you a little bit better feel. I tried to pick a font that was a little closer to the one on our website. Next, I went to UXPin. It's even better, although it is still missing a few tools. I didn't have a way to create circles or carrots, so I had to kind of drop that in to show the hero nav element. But much better font support. Looks pretty cool. You can upload all the images, and it's also really easy to create. Here's a tool I tend to pick, PowerPoint. I can put in nice shadows, even the shadow at the top, which is hard to do. I can pretty much make it look just about what it's going to look like. And that's only primarily because I know the tool really well. There are some games and tricks you got to play in order to do that. In order to do that shadow at the top, I actually put in just a gray layer. Well, not layer. PowerPoint has new layers. I just dropped in a gray rectangle and then put an oval, white oval on top of it to give the simulation of that shadow, which some of these other products didn't have anything like that. I also use Fireworks, which is the Adobe product. Fireworks does give you the ability to do some interaction. It has all the Adobe products use layers, if you've ever used any of them. And you can create what's called a web interaction layer, or an interactive layer, and so you can show some of the flow. And it's got quite a few cool pieces, similar to, not quite as many as Illustrator, but you can create both vector as well as mount type images. So it's pretty cool. Plus you can upload the images. So that's just kind of a sample of some of the low res and low fidelity and high fidelity type tools. Okay, so let me try to share some of the idea. Yes?
Do any of those options support multiple users working on wireframe at once on different computers?
Yeah, a lot of the online tools do support multiple people working on them at the same time. Typically, they'll work on different pages, but yeah, you can have multiple people. With Mockingbird, for example, you don't get that with the free version, but if you upgrade, you do get that ability. That's a good question. Okay, wireframes, how to create them. I'm not an expert with these things, but I have done quite a few of them, so let me just share a few ideas. I'm sure there's a lot more. Going back to this, it does help to have some of the upfront work done before you do wireframes, which is kind of typical product management stuff, and finding out who's your target market and what do you really want them to accomplish on the website or on this web app? What are they trying to do? So it's basically a matter of UX speak, we call them actors, but it's really your target users. Who's going to use this app and how are they going to use it? What do they want to accomplish with this particular application or website? Do you want them to sign up? Do you want them to reserve something? Do you want them to create a wireframe if it's an online company, online tool? What do you want them to do? I don't know if you've done use cases before. They don't have to be super sophisticated. They can be super simple. So something as simple as this. I picked Bluehost, so we may have different type of users, and we want them to sign up. So they sign up for the service, they create a password, they log into the control panel, et cetera, et cetera. So just a very simple, what do you want them to do, and how can you get them through that flow as efficiently and quickly as possible, and have it be almost intuitive, so that it's just like, that's easy, I can figure that out. Another way to do that is to create, I don't know if you can see that, but to create this just a simple little flow diagram. The flow diagram in this case could be something like I'm a vacation property manager and I want people to come in. I want to know who they are, give them an easy way to search for various properties. They can maybe even enter in some criteria to simplify just one second. Simplify the search, filter down. They select the property, no property owners, simple things like that. You can see the flow of what you're trying to accomplish. Yes?
I was just wondering if you have this somewhere online.
I think we're going to put all of these presentations online on the Openwest site after the conference. So I'm more than happy to share it. You can also, if you want, I've got an email address at the end. You can just email me. So anyway, that's another simple way to do this. Okay, another idea that I wanted to share with you is this concept of creating what I call master elements. It's just like coding. There's certain things you only want to do once and not have to redo them over and over again. And if you're doing even a web app, there are going to be various elements that are going to be the same on every page. So why reinvent the wheel and, why do the copy and paste game? The problem with copy and paste is, let's say this thing's got 20 screens that you're doing, and then somebody comes in and says, I don't really like this one. So you go in and make the change, and you got to go back and copy and paste, the other 19 pages. If you do it in the master area, you do it once, and if you have to go back and change it, you can. You just change it in the master, and then bingo, it's across, it's across all pages. So, be smart, just like you do with coding. Create once, use multiple. So it's things like your header, footer, sidebar, navigation, backgrounds, etc. I do a lot of the wireframes for our control panel. For example, when I do it, I always have the header the same. Actually, I do take this line out because this changes on the page. So that actually is there. But I create the header, and then I do most of my work here, and I don't have to replicate that same thing over and over again. And then when you put those together, it looks like that. And then you can reuse it on another page. But the only thing changing is the sub-nav line. Okay. Now this next one is really dependent on the app or the tool that you pick. Like I said, a lot of the tools have things built in, which is great. In that case, you may not need to go out and find a bunch of tools. If you use stuff like PowerPoint, which is more of a general purpose thing, it does help to go out and find these kind of things. Some of these things I got to know are old iPhone type stuff. But the cool thing is there are literally tons and tons of free tools out there that you can get. It's a lot like the open source code world, where you can go borrow frameworks, libraries, etc. There are tons of these tools out there, so you just have to search for them. Lots of cool icon libraries, and all kinds of cool stuff. The cool thing about using icon libraries, if you can, is that it may be the same one that the guys that are coding this thing are going to use. Or and if you're the coder, it's the same one you're going to use. Even if you just do a screenshot on them and then drop them in, and when you go to code it, you're using the exact same tool. So there are some pretty good advantages there. Lots and lots of these online tools. Now, this is, if you went into every one of the online products that are specific to wireframing, and even Glippy that has a area on wireframing, you'll find they'll have all kinds of really cool UI type stuff that are already pre-built. Many of the better ones also allow you to build your own and save them so you can reuse them. So that's one of the cool things. I was mentioning the calendar. It's simply a little tool on UX pin, and all I got to do is drag it in and drop it wherever I want, and it's there. Now, obviously, coding isn't that easy, but we're trying to make this this user interface done as quickly as possible to get feedback before we start coding. And so I don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time building this. If I was doing this in PowerPoint, I'd create this once and then I'd save it so I can reuse it over and over again. And that one would be a copy and paste. There's a couple of different tools that, let's call it a wireframe method, if you will. That you can, if you learn these basic ones, the latter one you may not need to use on some of the tools, but if you learn these basic tools, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. For example, group and ungroup. I'm amazed at how many times people don't use that, and it's so easy to use to basically, when you create stuff, to group it together, and then you can move it around together, and it's much easier to use. Another one is layers. Now, not all the products support layers. Most of the online tools don't. And it's only things like the Adobe products that provide layers. I love layers. It is so awesome. You can turn them on and off. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with layers. But very few apps support it. PowerPoint doesn't support it. So what do? Well, there's a way to kind of simulate layers, and that's with the arrange function. This is where you bring stuff to the front, send it to the back. You can also many times, take it up one at a time or take it down one at a time. I don't use those as much. I mostly just use those two. If you learn those two tools, that'll help you a ton. Also, tables. Now, I know in Web development, front-end web development world, tables are a no-no unless it's actual tabular data. But in wireframing, it's actually another one of those things in your tool bag that you use to create cool stuff. So don't be afraid to use them, obviously, for tabular data, but sometimes you'll want to use them for other things. And they don't have to be a table. It could be a toolbar, and you want it to, you want each tool to be centered or be the same size. And a lot of the tools will give you a way to make them the same size. Let me give you a couple examples. In fact, let me actually exit out of here. Okay, so here's a page I designed. Actually, I took a lot of the elements that were already there. We cleaned it up a little bit. But let's take this dialog box. I created that and then grouped it all together. And I may want to play around with exactly where it lands. So once I've grouped it, it's real easy to move the whole thing around and not have to worry about forgetting to bring something with it. So that's one of the cool things of grouping. So, back here. Oh, actually, I should stay back. Let me show you the next one. Okay, this is all the tabular data. Trying to do this without a table is really challenging. To do it with a table, it's very, very fast. This might be a UI for basically allowing the user to define which ports they turn on and off for a firewall application. Here's an example of layering, okay? So this might be the main page for setting up a new email account. And I want to show on top of that, drop it down the help screen. So I've grouped that together, drop it back down. Now I want to show a light box with the video. Okay, that's pretty simple. All I do is create a rectangle, drop it over the whole thing. Transparent, use transparency, which not all the tools provide, but a lot of them do, where you can kind of turn it down so you get this, see-through look. Dropped another gray rectangle here, and just took a screenshot of a video player and created this light box. Now I can kind of help people say, oh yeah, okay, I get it. When I click that box over there, I'm going to be able to see a video, and it's going to tell me how to do whatever page I'm on. Cool. So just learning a few of these little tricks, and that's just a simple little arrange. I've even had it where something underneath changed. So what I did is I simply took the three things on the top, cut them, went in, made the changes, and pasted them back. So it's a very handy tool. Okay, now this is probably the one that you'll spend the most time with, and that is, experimenting. There may be certain types of layouts you like. If it's a website, of course, you're always going to kind of look at some of what other people have done and maybe start with some of their ideas and play around with that. But one of the best ways to do this is to focus on a specific use case. Okay, I want to take this person, have them sign up, and then have them be able to do X. Okay, great. Let's wireframe that. And that's where you can play around and get some ideas. You might even show different ideas to your target reviewers or evaluators and let them kind of give you some feedback on what they like. This is a new wireframe for we actually have more than one brand. You didn't know. We also have HostMonster, a new wireframe for HostMonster. This isn't out yet, but I'm hoping it will be soon. This would be like the home page. Now, we may want to look at some different models. One thing we found is people don't necessarily come back to control panel that much. So one of the ways that we may be able to get people to come back more often is put some stats on their website and just have them very quickly be able to click different stats and be able to show different things. And then I navigate over here on the left. So just showing some different ways of laying things out. Yeah.
Is this in UXPin or?
This was actually just done in PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Quick question, do you have any, are any of the wireframe tools better for mobile wireframing and?
Yeah, what I found is some of the online tools, what I would do is look specific. In fact, you can even search mobile wireframing. And there are some, like UXPin, but that's only one. There's probably a dozen that are really good at just mobile. Yeah. especially if you're only going to be creating a mobile app. You're not creating a responsive web app, you're creating a mobile app. Okay, the obvious is getting feedback. Some of the things that we've been able to do, and I'm going to tell you an example here in a minute on what we did. We've gone through lots and lots of peer reviews with other groups in our company that will be using this particular application and using Wireframes, which is quite helpful. You can also, for the target users, you can get kind of a preliminary, I wouldn't call it the final user acceptance test, but you can at least get some preliminary idea. And again, it's much cheaper to make the changes now than it is to make them after you've coded this thing out. Okay. Now, once you've got the wireframe done, sometimes you do want to use a designer, especially to design out the elements. And the best time to do it is after you've kind of created and got the wireframes pretty well solid. I do like to remind my designers, and not to get too wild, that we created these wireframes for a reason and that we got some good feedback, so I would like them to follow the function, although I try to give them a little bit of license to get a little more creative with the design. So the wireframe can be viewed more as a conceptual. It doesn't have to be pixel for pixel like this, but things like the flow and some of the elements, you don't want those to change too much. So you do give license, but I like to say, hey, look, we really need to follow some of the ideas we've done here, and especially if we've gotten some good user feedback during the time we did the wireframes. I don't know about you, but whoever designed this thing over here on the right, in my opinion, should have been shot. I'm not a big fan of the Metro UI interface. And one of the jokes that we have, this next slide is kind of an internal joke. We have one of our devs who is literally OCD, and every time he sees a particular font, he goes wacko. So just don't have your designer get too wild here. Okay, let me give you a case study. We have Bluehost is in our second generation billing system, and we're now moving to the third generation. We used an open source product that was built for the telecommunication industry. It's incredibly extensible. It came with a sample app on what the internal people could use, and the sample app sucked. I mean, it was awful. So the product manager came and we kind of were talking with a bunch of people and said, hey, we really need to design out a new interface for this billing app. And we already had a billing app that our billing team used. So whenever somebody calls up and says, I want to cancel or I want to change this, or you guys charge the wrong credit card and charge this credit, that kind of stuff. Those were the guys that were taking those kind of calls, and so this is the application that team uses. And this was the new one. Now, of course, using this app for years, there was a lot of things that did well, and there were some things that did poorly. And so they wanted to make sure, let's make sure this new app does these other things really well. So they came to me and said, hey, can we get your help to create this thing? So I said, okay, number one, we got to identify who are the target users. And it wasn't just these three in the billing department. It was actually, they wanted it to be used by a far greater number of people. One of the things that we were trying to do, for example, is that oftentimes somebody would call up the technical support side, not the billing side, and say, I got this problem, and then they would help them through it. And they say, oh, by the way, I need you to fix this billing thing. Okay, let me transfer it. Well, we're trying to get rid of that transferring if they were simple type things. So even some of the support guys were going to be using this tool. Now, they may be restricted on what they could do, but that would minimize this transferring calls, that kind of stuff. The second thing I said was, well, I've never even used that billing app. I've never even seen it. I have no clue what this thing does. So I don't know how you can expect me to help you with the UI when I don't have a clue. So I said, the thing that you've got to do is you've got to basically go back to these groups and ask them to give us the use cases. What are the things they want to do? I had them do it, not me, because I didn't want to spend the time doing the research. And of course, this being part of the job, that was second nature. They were more than happy to do it. So we created, this is just one page. We created a document, and over here on the left, for all the use cases, it's like page 1 of about page 10. And in here, I started identifying, okay, the person would hit the main page, then this section, and then... So I tried to basically walk through the flow of my mind and make sure we covered all the use cases. And we're in the process right now. So I built out the wireframes and gave it back to the product manager and said, okay, you're going to have to go. And this is going to be an app that's not just used by Bluehost, but also by our sister divisions, like HostGator, it's one of our sister divisions, and some of the other brands. And so we had to go back and get the feedback from their billing folks and make sure that it did what they do, because they do things slightly different. Anyway, we came up with a pretty good starting point, and the cool thing about this, and I know this is a little grayed out, sorry about that, but the cool thing about this was that it made it, these were people who were not very technical, that don't know web apps, they don't know what you can or can't do, and but they could tell us here's what I need to get done, and we could start showing them. We start showing the interaction and all this other stuff, and it's gone a long way to making it easy to figure out what this thing's going to look like, what it's going to do, what's available on one page. We need a lot of accordions on the thing so we don't blow away with this whole long list of stuff, but show them just different sections based on what they need. And anyway, that's kind of where we're at. So we've started to build out the app now. We're just getting into it. We've spent maybe a month building it. But I think it's going to save us a ton of money, because this thing would have gone round and round and round if we hadn't done wireframes first. So when someone asks you this question, hopefully you can tell them a little bit about it, and you can say, yeah, we use this for page layouts, whether it's a website or whatever. I do plan on making this presentation available online, and so I did put in a bunch of the links for the products that at least I talked about. Realize there are many, many more, so you may want to look at some other ones. There's tons of good articles out there on, what are the best wireframing tools, a lot of different opinions. I also, if you like to use Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever, there's a lot of cool PowerPoint, a lot of cool kits you can get. So you can use those and have all these things kind of, some like the built-in tools. We've got built-in tools in a lot of these kits. There's also lots of mobile tools. So I've got a lot of those up there. And anyway, that's it.
What was the timeline like for that wireframe? Like, how long did you spend wireframing before you started coding?
That's a good question. It's a little unfair for me to answer that because I do like wireframing jobs. And this was a different job than what I normally do. So I had to kind of squeeze it in. It probably would have taken me full time to do this app, because this was a very complex app. Probably 2 weeks full time. But I had to sandwich it in, so it took about I did it over Christmas, so that helped. There's a lot of people gone, so they didn't bug me during a week or two, and helped me whatever. Anyway, thank you. Yeah, we are interested in hiring, so if you're interested, that's it. This is
I like it a lot. It's definitely but it's not very pretty, and it's really just across. It's got like layout guide, where to go for when it's time for design. My old job was just a good amount.